We're theater people. We're used to rolling with the punches, right, Heather? Okay, and I think we are. So the good news is we are live on YouTube. So YouTube is working. Let me tell everybody on Facebook. We're theater people. We're used to rolling with the punches, right? So okay, give me one. We are. Can you still hear me?
Can you still hear me?
Hang on. People were used to rolling with the punches, right? And let me. So give me one. Okay. Good. All right. So can you still hear me, Heather?
I can. Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. So let me tell people on Facebook where we are, where they can find us. And we'll give people a few minutes or a couple minutes anyway to hop on to the YouTube channel. Let's see. And people can see us. So that's good. All right. So I just shared it with the folks on Facebook, and we'll just wait for them to pop over here. And we'll just make it work. Oh, this makes me crazy though.
We're all figuring it out.
The technology piece of this is just ridiculous.
But think of how good video conferencing is going to be in a few months.
Yes, that is true. That is true. Hopefully they'll work out the glitches and and it definitely makes me crazy though. Hopefully you are joining us from Facebook and you have found Heather and I here on our YouTube channel. I'm sorry, there's a lot of traffic on Facebook tonight. And so I've had a little bit of trouble with Facebook today, but here we are on YouTube, and I am with the new executive director of Raleigh Little Theater, Heather Strickland. It's very exciting.
You are the first person to introduce me with that title, so thank you.
How does it feel hearing it?
Oh, it's still overwhelming. You know, nothing has changed within the four walls that I have occupied for the past several weeks. So I think it's probably taking a little bit longer to absorb this change in my life than it normally would.
Well, it's very exciting for the theater community. I know there was so much joy and love for you and for Raleigh Little Theater yesterday. It was exciting to watch. Very exciting.
I mean, that's how that community steps up, is we just embrace everything and support each other and cheer each other on. And I was very fortunate to have that wrap around me yesterday.
So before we get into your new role at Raleigh Little Theater, you are a director, an actor, dance and fight choreographer, and you've been a volunteer at Raleigh Little Theater. Where did you first develop your love of theater? Where did that theater, bug hit you?
I was in kindergarten, and I was cast in the role of Chicken Little. And I very clearly remember this role because we had to make these construction paper hats to be the beaks of the birds that we all were. And to have the sky falling on me, one of the other characters actually dropped an acorn on the top of this construction paper helmet that I was wearing. And I remember the sound, like I remember it being incredibly loud, and I didn't like that they had to drop the acorn on top of me. And so when I would then run around screaming the sky is falling, I was truly in distress. And so the acting bug bit me very young. And I actually remember when I went off to college, I had originally chose my major as a communications major, and later added theater. So I was a double major in communications and theater. And when I added my major, I was a little bit hesitant to tell my parents, because I was like, what are they going to think of me adding a theater major? And both of my parents looked at me and they were said, well, it's about time. We always knew you should be doing this.
So it's good that they were supportive. So Chicken Little was your first show. Do you remember the first show you saw?
We used to frequent, I grew up in upstate New York, and there is a fabulous children's theater in Albany, New York called The Egg. And they had, I remember two productions very specifically. One was called Mum and Chance, which was this very sort of abstract puppet, but for children show. And the other one was The Wind in the Willows. And I will never forget watching The Wind in the Willows. It was probably one of the most thrilling theater experiences of my life.
Yeah, I don't think, and if you love the theater, I don't think you ever forget either your first show that you were in or your first show that you saw that you just fell in love with.
Yeah, and in my mind, my memory of The Egg is that it was this enormous theater. Like it probably had like 5,000 seats, and it was this enormous stage, and the productions were incredibly elaborate, but it probably wasn't that. But I don't want to know now. I will never go back to The Egg because I don't want to know if it's not that incredibly impressive.
It's funny. My first theater going experience in Miami, we used to frequent the merry-go-round playhouse, and anymore, but I never wanted to go back as an adult or as I got older because I just didn't want. I had a picture in my mind and I wanted that to be frozen in time.
Well,
You
it's magic. And I remember when I took my daughter to her first theater production. She is, 8 now, but I took her to see Paper Hand Puppet Intervention when she was, goodness, she couldn't have been 2. She was little. And we were in the big amphitheater at Forest Theater, and she stood on those stones the entire time, just staring at it. And she was completely captured by this entire show. And I thought, this is what I know of theater, is this moment right here. And it was, in a way, probably reliving a little bit of being at the Egg in Albany, New York when I was a child.
and I know it's important to you. You've taken her to the theater since. She was in the RLT production of Cinderella last December. So why, as a mom, or again, before we get to all the RLT stuff, as a mom, why is it important to expose your kids to the arts? Because for me and my house, it's very important.
I think, one, watching something that I hold so special and watching it through my child's eyes, it's the magic, right? That is the thing that just sticks with me, is how magic it is. When you become a parent, watching the world through your child's eyes is always amazing, because you're seeing the world new and you're seeing all these things that you never saw before. And so then to add that to layering on this art that I love and adore, and I know the power so intimately of, and watching my child experience it's absolutely magical. And I fell in love with theater all over again. And then watching her go through the rehearsal process of Cinderella, I was reminded about why I love to be a part of creating theater, because she would come home and she'd be very excited, and she loved performing. She loved the costumes. She loved all of that. But what she loved the most about being a part of RLT Cinderella was the people. It
Mhm.
was her community. It was her friends. Those other mice ponies were her besties for that amount of time. And I watched her go through a show closing, which I know that heartbreak. And then I watched my child do it, and I never wanted her to ever have to do it ever again. Um, and then it's also sort of the experiences that, her worldview is so much broader because of the amount of theater that she's been exposed to at such a young age. She's empathetic. She's understanding that her perspective on the world is not the only one, that there are different ways that folks walk through this world. And she has, I mean, there's still a lot of that to learn, and there's probably going to be many more hard lessons for that over the course of her life, but she has some sense of that she is one within billions of different ways of seeing the world. And it's all those reasons that I am just again reminded time and time again watching her of how powerful storytelling is to who we are, and as individuals and collectively.
Well, and I think it just gives them problem solving. Arts and arts education and exposing your children to the arts, to me, just is invaluable in all disciplines. They don't have to want to become artists to be art appreciators. And I've seen it with my daughter too. It's exciting to watch it through their eyes.
Yeah. Well, and even now she's taking virtual theater classes, and she's developed new friendships with children she's never met. And that was not part of my upbringing. I didn't grow up in this world where I could connect with kids my own age through video conferencing, but that is her world. This is part of the growing up that she's going to have to do. And she has a friend that she's never met in person.
Hmm. And how weird is it when your 8-year-old says, I have a Zoom meeting, can't talk right now, mom?
We had a meeting at 11 o'clock today to work on script writing with her new friend. And I was like, I'm not going to say no to that. That sounds like something that I would be doing right now.
Sounds very productive. So when did you first discover Raleigh Little Theater?
Yeah, so after living in New York for the earliest years of my life, my family eventually moved down to Florida. And then I went to college in North Florida. And so shortly after I graduated, I could go anywhere. I had a college degree. I really didn't want to stay in Florida anymore. And I put 5 cities into a hat. And I pulled out Raleigh, North Carolina. Raleigh ended up in the hat because I did have some friends that had connections to the theater scene here in Raleigh. And so even before I moved up here, I came to visit Raleigh, North Carolina, just to kind of check it out, understand a little bit more about this place that I was looking at moving to. And this friend that was living in Florida at the time, but had connections to Raleigh, North Carolina, said, you must go visit Raleigh Little Theater. So on my visit, before I even lived here, I went to see Mother Hicks at Raleigh Little Theater. Now this is back in 2002, so this is a long time ago. And I have still very fond memories of that production. And I so clearly remember walking out of the theater and thinking, if this is the kind of theater that is being produced in Raleigh, North Carolina, this is where I want to be. And that was the first time, that was my first experience with Raleigh Little Theater. And, it's been probably many years since I thought about that moment, but over the last several months, I have thought about that moment so many times, just sort of thinking of my life has been pointing me in this direction.
Kind of kismet a little bit. And so what was your first volunteer experience? Because that was like 15 years ago that you first volunteered.
Yeah, so I moved up to North Carolina shortly after that. I auditioned a couple times at Raleigh Little Theater, but didn't get the role. Until in 2005, I was cast in As You Like It out in the amphitheater. I got the part of Rosalind. So my first performance was out in that gorgeous amphitheater, screaming Shakespeare to the full moon every night. So I actually remember there is this, one of Rosalind's lines in As You Like It is, I can do strange things, kind of talking about, she's magical and she can make all of these things happen. And there was one night during a performance that I delivered that line, beautiful full moon. And somewhere not very far away, a car backfired. So there was this loud boom right when I delivered that line. And the entire audience went, oh, that was well done.
Not even planned. You can't even plan for those moments.
Sometimes theater magic just happens.
So there's something so special. I mean, as you said, there is something so special about Raleigh Little Theater, but it feels like a strange time for you to be stepping in as executive director. Everything's shut down. There's all these contingency. Every time I talk to Patrick, he's like, we have contingency plans over contingency plans over contingency plans. And you're stepping into these shoes. Charles really left an indelible mark on that position. And we're in the midst of a pandemic. And I know the selection process for this type of role spans many months. So when you started interviewing for this, it's pre-pandemic. And I'm sure your hopes, your dreams, your vision, the role you would play looks very different than it does when you accept the job. So, how has that vision for you changed from really the journey of starting this whole process?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions in that. So yeah, it definitely changed when I first really considered this a possibility for myself. The world was 180 degrees very different. And my thoughts of what I could bring and what I would be able to come in and do, and what I was hoping would be the successes that I would be able to achieve, those, they're not the same anymore. Success after 1 year is might be that the doors are still open. And that's certainly not the bar that I was hoping for when I first started. What we haven't talked a lot about is my professional career. I when I moved to North Carolina shortly after that, I was the marketing director at Carolina Ballet for a number of years. And then I worked over as the communications director for the North Carolina Department of State Treasurer under State Treasurer Janet Cowell. And then currently I am the communications and fund development director for the Smart Start Network. And during my career, I have actually faced crisis in a couple different ways. When I worked at the State Treasurer's office, I started in that job in 2008. State Treasurer Janet Cowell took office in 2009. That is right around the time that the housing bubble burst and the bottom dropped out of the economy. In fact, the first press conference that I had to organize for then State Treasurer Janet Cowell was announcing a 20% drop in our state's pension fund. So I was part of, the economic recovery for North Carolina during those incredibly hard times. And then when I started at Smart Start in 2012, and in 2013 is when the federal government shut down. And federal dollars stopped flowing to states. And I was working for an organization that works in all things early childhood. We are the early childhood infrastructure for North Carolina. And that meant a lot of federal subsidy dollars that stopped flowing to young children and their families. And so I was part of the work of keeping some sort of dollars flowing so that kids didn't lose childcare, so that families could start working. And so the last two jobs that I have been marked with these sort of like moments of crisis of where I've had to come in and I've had to rally with some incredibly smart and incredibly dedicated folks. And we have gotten through, and then we have figured out how we thrive on the other side of this. So unfortunately, I am maybe prepared for this moment. And the other thing is certainly the folks that are closest to me during the process, they were asking me, is this really the right time for this kind of change in your life? Is this really the right thing? Is this the right step you want to take? It's risky. And maybe I should have thought about this more, but I don't think it was ever an option for me to not pursue this job once I started really thinking about this opportunity. And I wondered why that was, because I think if it was any other job, I probably would have paused for much longer and really considered that question and potentially not have even taken it. But what I realized about this job is this is not just a next career step for me. This is not another job. I mean, this is personal. This is my family. These are my friends. And when your family and your friends call you and say, we need you, you don't stop to analyze personal risk. You get in your car and you go. And, so that's why I don't think I paused. That's why I don't think that I hesitated to step into this role, because this is my community. And this is exactly where I'm supposed to be at this moment.
And how does your experience with Raleigh Little Theater, because you come to this position from such an interesting vantage point. You've been a volunteer, you've been an actor on the stage, you've been a board member. So you have all these different hats that you've already worn there. So how does that inform how you approach a role like this, especially during a time like this?
Well, one, I know the people, I know the staff, I know the board, and those are very, very big reasons of why I wanted this job. I admire all of those individuals so much. That staff is creative and dedicated and so hardworking, and I know that. And that was a huge bonus, knowing the team that I was going to work with. The board is incredibly supportive. They work so hard on behalf of this theater. And I know this community, in many ways, I am going to be able to hit the ground running, because there is such a foundation of trust for me in the community and for the community with me. And I think that trying to establish those sorts of relationships and that sort of trust in this environment for somebody that didn't know those people like I know them would be really challenging.
And somebody who wasn't from the area or new to it, that it would be I feel like it would be impossible. So it's nice. It's like your home.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good point too, because this theater community is one of the most supportive communities. And I know all the theaters, and I know many of those different folks, and I've had wonderful notes from many of the different companies in the Triangle. And they're already saying, let us know. And, my response back to them has always been, oh, you will definitely be hearing from me, because we got to stick together through this.
Absolutely. So what are the challenges of steering a ship, any arts organization, amidst a crisis? And this is an unprecedented crisis, because this is really a time when all theaters, including Raleigh Little Theater, have to get creative and pivot their programs and come up with contingency plans. So, what are the challenges to keeping the brick and mortar doors and the virtual doors open?
Oh, that's a big question. I think one of the hardest things right now is the uncertainty. We don't know when we're going to be able to be back in a room together. And, because of that, even if we had a date, even if it was kind of far off, we would then at least be able to sort of plan for that moment. But we don't have a date. We don't know if, I know that we're going to start to enter phase 1 at the end of this week of starting to be able to reopen. But we don't know then when phase 2 happens. We don't know if later this year we are going to be right back to where we are right now. So the uncertainty, especially makes things like fiscal planning incredibly difficult, because we are going to be uncertain for a year. And, we are so dependent on people being in our space to generate revenue. And that has been completely taken away from us. And I mean, that's not just true for theaters. That is true for so many businesses and so many independent artists, is that we are just so reliant on being in the same space together. So then, you mentioned, thinking through virtual. I mean, so many of our theaters have adapted very quickly to figure out, what does virtual programming look like? What does it mean to connect with people when we can't bring them into these walls? And luckily we are a creative bunch, and we have done some amazing work, and you have done some incredible work maintaining the connection between this community. But we've got a lot more lessons to learn. And I think one of the other challenges of this is making sure that we really pay attention to the lessons that we are learning right now. When you're operating in crisis, it's just trying to survive. And there's so little space to pause and be really intentional about, what are we learning? How are we growing? What are the successes that we are having? And I don't want to lose those moments, because I think they're really critical. The inequities that we are seeing right now, I mean, it's all being exposed, right? We are wildly seeing the pain points that are within society, that are within the structure that we traditionally operate in. And if we don't take the opportunity to see those and name them and learn from them, we're going to rebuild an infrastructure that wasn't really working for everyone anyway. And if we don't take the opportunity to reinvent, rebuild in a new way right now, when are we going to do it?
Well, and one thing that I love about Raleigh Little Theater is it's been on the cusp, in my mind, of being so inclusive and working so closely with Arts Access, and making sure that the theater, and it's a historic building, so when we say include, as inclusive as an historic building can be. But I wonder, in a lot of these interviews, the question of accessibility in the theater has come up, because a lot of these virtual tools that we're all getting used to using now opens up theater to audiences who may not physically be able to come into the space on a good day. So are some of these tools, do you think, are some of the lessons that we learn is how to make theater more accessible to people?
Oh, I hope so. Gosh, if that's not the baseline of what we take away from all of this, we've gone through all of this for nothing. I mean, there's so many walls that are being broken down, right? You and I are both in our homes right now. In our own ways, we are incredibly vulnerable. There's a whole audience on the internet that has been invited into our homes right now. And if you think about that, I know that, even in my daily work, my child is now only 3 feet away from me as I do my day job. And there's this new sort of grace that's being allowed of my colleagues. If I have to, pause or turn off my video on a Zoom meeting, because this actually happened earlier this week. My child burned herself on the stove while I was trying to run a Zoom meeting. And I said, I gotta go. And every single person on the Zoom meeting said, that's okay. You go take care of that. We'll see you in a minute. And it's not that, my child's been with me my whole life, But now my colleagues are seeing me in all of my life versus just how they're used to seeing me, which is sans my daughter burning herself on the stove. So, you know, there's all of those walls that are being broken down. There's those individual barriers, there's systematic barriers that we're seeing. And so, you know, it's on all of us right now to see those, to know those, to understand how this different way of living and working is affecting us, and to know when it hurts, and to also know when we are experiencing new connection and new vulnerabilities because of it. And then let's figure out a way that we take those things, those lessons, those good moments, those moments of joy. And as we come back and we're so grateful for being back in a room together, let's figure out how those that can't maybe be back in that room together are still with us in all the ways that we found.
The other thing I wonder as we navigate this time is I've always loved the arts. So it's not new for me to lean on the arts in a time of crisis. That's my happy place. But I think a lot of people who don't typically lean on the arts are finding themselves leaning on the arts during this pandemic, either through books or movies or all of these wonderful concerts and live streams that are being made available to us. Do you think this opens up a world to new audiences? Do you think that we're going to have some new people coming to the theater on the other side of this?
Yes. Yes. I mean, absolutely. I have to have hope in that. Um, you know, I think there's a new way of thinking through what it means to be resilient and what it means to heal.
Mm.
And I've been thinking quite a lot about resilience recently. Within my current position in the world of early childhood, we do a lot of work building resilient communities. A huge focus of what we do is, you know, how do you ensure that any place that a child can go in a community is supporting that child's social and emotional development, and those are indicators of a resilient community. And you know, there's key pieces of what it means to be resilient, and the two that I've been really thinking through are being able to adapt, which many of us are figuring out how to adapt right now. But another key piece of being resilient is that when adapting isn't enough, transforming. And I'm really interested in what happens to the arts. Currently, the arts are adapting in many, many, many ways. But the next step is for the arts to transform, to truly show resilience for this. And I am so curious about what we're going to figure out as we go through that next step. And then, you know, the other key piece of being resilient is courage. And that's going to be critical through all of these phases as we understand what it means to heal and be resilient as an arts community.
And I think too, part of that resilience, you know, I did not realize this until I was doing some research today. Raleigh Little Theater was born out of um, the New Deal during the Great Depression, basically. And people can look up the history and learn more about that. But to me, that time period feels significant to what we're going through right now and speaks to the fact that the theater's not going anywhere. Theater is resilient. But during that period of time, so much funding and support came out of the Great Depression for the arts. Do you think we're going to see that on the other side of this? I hope we do, but do you think we're going to see similar, I don't want to say similar programs to the New Deal, but similar support systems for the arts in funding and federal support, state support?
Yeah, I imagine that's the swell of energy will be absolutely similar. Hopefully we've learned some lessons since that time, and kind of different ways of thinking through, where public dollars and private dollars meet and how they support each other and help each other innovate. I think we're a little bit more sophisticated in that funding structure. So I think we'll absolutely see a new way of thinking about how these things are funded. I'm interested in even, very broadly how we think about how nonprofits operate. Why is there this kind of holding on to a zero-based budget? And does that make sense? And I think if you think through kind of the financial sustainability of, corporations, nonprofits, individual artists, like we've got to rethink about how all of those things happen, because I think a lot of what we're seeing right now, where sometimes those that are doing well through these times and are surviving, we might mistake privilege for resilience. And I think that's a mistake, because it's not necessarily that those that aren't doing well and that those are struggling through these times aren't resilient. It's just that they don't have access to a lot of the things that many other folks do have access to. So I hope that swell of energy turns into a different way of thinking through funding that is a bit more supportive, so that we can all have resilience and not just the privileged few.
I love that. I You and I had a conversation very early on. I did a podcast about this pandemic and how it was affecting our arts community, and I called you and we had this wonderful conversation. And something that you said to me then, and this was about 8 weeks ago now, something that you
Well,
said
it's
to me
totally
then,
different then.
I know it seems like a different world, but something that you said was about picking up the pieces, that as artists, as arts organizations, we're very good at picking up the pieces and rolling with the punches and being resilient, but that this all takes an emotional toll that's going to last for a really long time. So, what do you see the toll being on our artists and our arts organizations like Raleigh Little Theater?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember that conversation, and thank you for raising up those stories. Yeah, it's trauma. I mean, all of us are experiencing in trauma in some way or another, and trauma has incredibly long lasting effects. In fact, trauma is passed down to generations. I'm very worried for my daughter about what's the life that is now in front of her, having lived this trauma so early in her life. And the thing about trauma is it kind of comes and it rears its ugly head to us in moments where we're not quite ready for it. And so the emotional fallout from all of this is going to be much further down the road, when we feel like we got through the hard time, we have survived, we are thriving. But then as soon as we think we're thriving, we can relax a little bit, is when I think we'll feel a lot of this sort of resurface. And we're part of an arts community. What we will do with that is we will tell our stories, and that will help other people understand the trauma that they're dealing with and what they're feeling, because they will be able to empathize and identify with the stories that we will then be raising up. And that is going to help with the healing process. And that is going to help with society understanding what we are all going through. And that is going to then shift policy and decisions by our lawmakers. And that is the critical cycle that storytellers always play in helping society heal.
Arts as a healer, I definitely think that's a big part of it. Storytelling. Excuse me. This is Giving Tuesday. So it seems like a very good time to talk about this. But what can the community do as we navigate these unprecedented times to support companies like Raleigh Little Theater so that you guys can keep the doors open and we can return to the theater sometime soonish?
Yes. Well, first, RLT has had a fabulous Giving Tuesday campaign, Sell Out the Sutton. I think we are very close to selling it out a second time. I checked, of course, before we got on this, and I think we were only a few seats away from a second sellout. We sold out once, and we got to see a video of Patrick performing an original song. If you haven't seen that yet, you should absolutely go over to the RLT Facebook page and check it out. And if we sell it out a second time, we get a performance by Brian Westbrook. So two incredibly talented performers. So please help us sell those final seats today. I think the ask is for everyone, the entire community, the volunteers, the artists, the audience members, the donors, is to, continue to engage in the way that you would. That looks really different right now because you don't get to pay your ticket cost and show up at the theater and see a show. But that doesn't mean that that's not still really important. Paying the ticket is going to look a little bit different. Showing up at the theater is going to look a little bit different, and seeing a show is going to look a little bit different. But we still need you to do it. You still will hear stories. You still will be moved. You still will have an incredible experience, but please keep showing up. Keep volunteering. We're really going to need our volunteers as soon as those doors open back up. We're probably going to need our volunteers before that can actually even happen. So be ready, engage, connect with us. As I step into this role, I'm going to need lots of ideas and good energy of what are the new ways to do this. So connect with me, connect with any of the staff. We need everyone to keep engaging like they will.
And I know Patrick has been having weekly video meetings online on Facebook that people have been able to watch and participate in. Will you be having some virtual events where people can interact with you through Facebook or any of the other platforms?
I sure hope so. Those conversations have already started, so I'm sure that everyone will start to see those really soon. And,
And
such a critical part, RLT, yes, is known for some top quality performances and a stellar education program. RLT is also about the community and the connection that provides. And as, we're starting to think through what does that mean, keeping that community connected is just as important to us as making sure we are still producing great art and great education programs.
And from the board member's perspective, does this change the way boards operate? Because when it comes to crisis management, I mean, this was not a crisis anybody could have prepared for. But now that we know this is a possibility, or in the realm of possibility, or even in the realm of possibility happening again, do boards start planning differently in the way they approach crisis management?
Absolutely. I mean, there's, one, even stepping into the crisis, I mean, we need everyone's best thinking. So the board has stepped up in tremendous ways, specifically to RLT, trying to do this at the same time that there is an executive director search going on. I mean, that's a lot to manage. And so if we don't sort of start thinking about, as we, because we're starting to kind of burn through reserves, we're going to have to start thinking about how do we build those back up and how do we build them up in a way that if we hit this again, that we've got a little bit more cushion.
Yes. And then what do you need the community to do after this pandemic? After the doors are back open, what does going to the theater look like when the doors open back up? Because I think it's going to be a new normal. And how can the community support you when that happens?
Yeah, I hope it's a new normal. I hope it's not normal at all. I hope that we kind of reinvent how we understand what it means to show up at the theater. And I don't know exactly what that looks like yet. And if there's anyone out there that knows exactly what that looks like in 6 months to a year, please call me. I need to talk to you. I think we're going to need the community to be the community that it always has been, to be flexible, to be engaged, to be committed, and to keep showing up. We hear it. One of my favorite parts every year is hearing at the Canties what it means to be a part of the family and the home that is RLT, and we got to figure out a way to hold on to that. And I know we will.
I know you will, because there is such a strong community there. You just have to walk into the lobby and you feel the communal thing. So when you officially start in June, we talked about that at the beginning or before we went on the air. So the official start date is June
17th.
June 17th. Well, it's very exciting. It's exciting for our community and it's exciting for the arts here in Raleigh and this area. And I know we're all going to be watching to see what happens and giving our virtual hugs to the theater.
I am so incredibly honored. This is my dream. This is everything that I am, and I'm incredibly fortunate. And I can't wait to get started, even though I know it's going to be tough.
Well, if anybody can do it, you've got this. and I'm excited to see what happens next. I can't wait to get back to the theater and be with everyone. I love going to Raleigh Little Theater, but I'm excited to see what's next.
I can't wait to walk back through the doors of that building. I mean, it's been weeks since I've been inside Raleigh Little Theater. I can't remember the last time that I've gone this long without being at Raleigh Little Theater. And the next time I get to walk through those doors, it's going to be as the executive director.
So what do you think that moment will feel like,
I don't know. I don't think I will break down in tears if I start thinking about that moment too much.
Well, thank you for joining me. Thank you everyone for watching and bearing with us through the technical issues. I will post this on Facebook when this is done, so people who weren't able to find us on YouTube will be able to watch it. And just stay safe and healthy so you can steer this ship that we all love.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all that you are doing to keep this community connected. It's amazing work and I am grateful.
Well, thank you. And I will, I'll go to sleep smiling tonight now that I've talked to you because you've been beaming ear to ear. I can see the excitement written all over your face. So it's going to be an exciting time. Thank you again. Let me tell everybody what's coming up tomorrow because we have a few really good events tomorrow. Tomorrow I have Bill Hirschman with me at noon. So spend your lunch hour with Bill and I. Bill is the former president or the former chair of the American Theater Critics Association. And he's a theater critic in South Florida. So we'll take a little field trip and find out how South Florida theaters are faring. I know you lived in Florida for a long time, so did I. So I'll be curious to hear what's happening there. And then at 5 p.m., Jesse Gephardt, who is a Raleigh Little Theater, a friend of Raleigh Little Theater, frequent Raleigh Little Theater. He will be with Penn Holderness at 5 o'clock doing a one-on-one interview. And then Susanna Huff will be doing a one-on-one interview with J. Alphonse Nicholson, who was just in A Soldier's Play. So that'll be really exciting to hear too. So we've got a lot of good events and so many great artists that live right here. We don't have to go too far for great art.
So much here.
Thank you, Heather. And we'll chat soon again, I'm sure. And everybody, Giving Tuesday isn't over, so give to your favorite theaters. Look up Raleigh Little Theater. If you can't pick one, there's the NC Artist Relief Fund that's helping our artists. So just support local theaters, support our local artists. Thank you, Heather. Take care of
Thank you.
yourself.
You too.
Good night.
Good night.